Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to talk about a Mutants and Mastermind 2nd edition book, Warriors and Warlocks. This is a supplement that emulates the sword and sorcery genre of comic books, the most famous being the Savage Sword of Conan. I actually own, or did at one time, own some copies of that comic, and I remember reading them when it's back in the 70s, I guess, and I thought they were a whole lot of fun. Even then, though, I realized that they were kind of cheesy. But they prepared me well for the Arnold Schwarzenegger version of Conan. So this supplement is a toolkit, providing a GM what he needs to emulate that style of sword and sorcery comic book. It presents you, first thing it presents you with is a really nicely done chapter showing the history of sword and sorcery comic books. I wasn't expecting this. I should have. Many Mutants and Masterminds books are excellent in this regard, having nice background information, and this does not let you down. I thought it was quite well done. And then they get into the actual genre itself. Now, it's important to realize that this game is not, supplement is not really emulating the original source material like Howard's Conan, or necessarily fantasy role-playing games per se, but the actual sword and sorcery comic book. There's a slight difference there. I'll get into that later. And it presents you with 3 different power levels: heroic, cinematic, and epic. Now, heroic is 6th, power level of 6, and if anyone who's familiar with Mutants and Masterminds, you'll understand what that means. Power levels tell you how many character points you have to play with to make your characters. And that's kind of a grim and gritty style of play, equivalent to, film noir style of superhero characters like the Shadow. Then you have heroic, and heroic is more along the lines of your more traditional Conan-like characters. Magic users, wizards, some fairly powerful mystical beasts you'll be fighting, things like that. And then you get into the epic, which is 10 and up. And that's when it really starts to get powerful. You got godlings, and a lot of Greek myth kind of thing falls into the epic character category. And it provides you with information about like different kinds of powers, so you can emulate the archetypes of that genre. It gives you different skills, how to use the current skills, new skills, feats, how the current feats are going to be modified slightly to use in this genre, plus new feats. Drawbacks, equipment, templates, for example, racial templates, like dwarves, elves, that kind of concept. Professional templates, say if you're, you're a warrior, you're a hunter, you're an archer, you're a scholar, you're a seer, things like that. Template creation examples, how to create your own custom templates that you may want to use in a campaign. Then we get into archetypes in particular. Divine Champion, Half-Crazed War Mage, Silver-Tongued Rake, World-Weary Sellsword, Legendary Swordmaster, Mighty Thewed Barbarian, Time-Lost Hero. That's kind of like a man from our time thrust into a fantasy world. Cursed Wanderer, and Demigod Adventurer. Best example of Demigod Adventurer I can think of off the top of my head would be either Hercules or Thor in the Marvel Universe. Then we get into sword and sorcery series, like, for example, Villain Archetypes, Barbarian Warlord, Black Knight, Evil Sorcerer, Fiendish Shapeshifter, Giant Chieftain, Master Assassin, and Undead Overlord. And this being a Mutants and Mastermind supplement, it means that every single one of these is fully statted out for your use. So you can pick them up instantaneously, slap a name on them, and you're good to go, either as a PC or an NPC. Monsters and minions, supporting cast archetypes, magic items. And they have them broken into different power levels, and how to create them and things like that. Then it's like how to create sword and sorcery adventures, like the Departure, the Descent, the Return. Different kind of archetypal adventures. Things that would fit right into any kind of comic or any kind of fantasy movie that you've seen. These are allowing you to take those ideas and translate them into adventure seeds, which is very nice. Then they give some actual series frameworks like Stranger in a Strange Land, Echoes of Another Age, these are kind of campaign ideas that will be familiar to anyone who's read this genre of comics or played any kind of fantasy role-playing game for any time at all, or read fantasy fiction for that matter. There's actually a section here on mass combat. Now, I'll freely admit I did not use this, and I'm not the best at mass combat. I can only think I've used the mass combat in 30 years, like once or twice. So I can't tell you how well they work, but the fact that they're included is good, because you may want to use them. Then we have how to use this supplement to run the Freeport City of Adventure, which is useful for people who like the Freeport setting. This allows you to convert everything you need to play Freeport using this supplement and the Mutant Mastermind world rules. Then they have also Freedom's Reach, which was another somewhat more generic fantasy, and then the Lost World premise, the campaign notes, the brief history of the Lost World, the classic Lost World setting, which I've always thought was a nice setting. Then it lists contributors, index, and open gaming license. Now, does this product deliver? Does it give you what you need to run a sword and sorcery genre superhero type adventure? And I say it does unequivocally. It succeeds at this. It has all kinds of resources that you could use in your regular Mutants and Mastermind campaign. There's monsters and magic items in here galore. Things you could just lift right up and throw them into a standard superheroes game. You don't want to have them be monsters? They're mutants. You don't want to use mutants? They're aliens. They're just lots of useful things in here. It'd be good if you want to take your Freedom City heroes and dump them into a fantasy world. Here you go. Lots of comics have done that, man. Or you could create a character in this supplement and bring it into Freedom City. I've seen a what-if issue of Marvel where Conan ended up in our world in New York City. He became a gang leader. It was kind of entertaining. And so I think this supplement has all kinds of utility if you're a player of Mutants and Mastermind. And this is designed for the second edition version. I don't know how applicable it would be to third. I haven't read the third. I really don't know. So anyone who has read the third edition rules, you may be able to tell me how difficult it would be to convert something from the second edition to the third edition. Now, they also suggest that this could be used to run an actual straight-up fantasy campaign, like D&D, Pathfinder, that genre. And I gotta tell you, I don't think it fits my bill for that in that regard, but this just may be me. The Mutants and Mastermind system uses a toughness roll as opposed to hit points. So if somebody hits you with a weapon, you roll your toughness roll, you get a good roll. It doesn't hurt you, or it hurts you less. And if it does hurt you, you take damage, and you can get knocked down. So essentially, it's very much you don't go down, you don't go down, you don't go down, you go down. But while I'm reading this, I realize that I like hit points in my fantasy games. This is just me. This is not objective in the least. This is purely subjective opinion here. But I've come to realize as I read this that I like D&D hit points. It's the same result. You're up, you're up, you're up, you're up, you're down. But I just like them better. Maybe it's because I've been using them for so long. I don't know. And a toughness roll seems just less natural to me. But if I were going to run a fantasy game, I don't think I would use this. I would use this if I wanted to bring a fantasy element into a Mutants and Mastermind game without question. If I want to dump standard Freedom Heroes characters into a fantasy setting, or port fantasy setting characters into a Freedom Hero setting. For example, you could start a D&D style game, tell your players, using this system, and then dump them into Freedom City. Short term or long term. Suddenly they have to find their way in the world. Now, obviously, you're going to have to have mature players who are going to be able to handle that kind of shock to the system, if you will. But I think it would make a nice campaign idea. So I really think this is an excellent product. I've heard people say that they would think that it's their go-to version for fantasy games, and more power to them. Maybe it is for you. I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say. I think this is a good product. If you like Mutants and Mastermind, I think you should look into it.